Yeah, hello everybody. Um, I'm Mitja. I'm actually not a designer. Maybe I am. But I'm a software designer more than I am a designer of gliders. So I do software for Nova, and yeah, that's my job there. And the plan for today is to give you a bit of an insight on how gliders are made, or what actually is needed to or required to build a glider. So I will not talk about how to fly or how to improve your flying, but instead you should gain a bit more knowledge about your gliders and what it takes to build them. So today the plan. The font is a bit small, but never mind. I will read everything anyway. The plan for today is talk a bit about the motivation, because before you have a product, you obviously need a motivation to build one, and that doesn't even matter if you're building paragliders or whatever the product you have. You of course need motivation, and soon after the motivation, some basic technical data is defined. This is done quite soon and fast, and after that comes the development stage, which is already a bit time consuming before the simulation stage. Simulation stage is one of my favorites. I will also spend the most time talking about it because it's the most fun for me. And after the simulation stage comes the prototyping, then are the boarding parts, which is certification and stock, and making the release news. Yeah, so let's start. Of course, motivation is very important. Like I said, if you want to design a product, if you want to build a product, and it does not matter whatever the product is, you need to know what you're trying to achieve. You have to know what your goals are. And by that I mean that you have to, decide, do you want to have the best performance, or do you want to have the safest glider, or do you want to have the most expensive glider, for whatever the reason. But this can be your motivation. Or maybe you want to have the cheapest glider. Or since 6Fs is becoming more and more popular, maybe you want to have the lightest glider. These are all the questions you want to ask yourself before you even start designing, because all the later decisions depend on this one. Because you obviously will not add mini ribs to your glider if you want to have the cheapest glider, because mini ribs costs money and time. And yeah, of course, these questions are also connected to each other, because for whatever the reason, you cannot have the best performance and the safest glider at the same time. That's kind of obvious. And this step is usually done quite quickly. It can be a part of your business plan, but it can also be done while drinking beer with your friends. So you suddenly get an idea, okay, I want to build the lightest glider, and that's your motivation. And then you build upon that. And by that I mean that you quite quickly decide on the basic technical data, which is usually the targeted safety class. So do you want to have an ENA, B, C, D, or CCC glider? That's totally up to your decision. But my point is that quite early in the development stage, you have to decide on the flat area and aspect ratio, which are the two factors that influence the safety class quite a lot. Soon after that, you define your planform shape, curvature, cell count, and majority of the materials. Why majority? Because you obviously want to test some new materials too. So you don't exactly fix the materials at this stage, but you have a rough feeling what the materials will be. And these basic technical data are also all the things that you will probably not really change during the development stage. You will and you can, but you most often don't. After the basic technical data is defined, you move on to the more interesting part, which is the development stage. And this is actually this is in fact the first complex stage, I think. And the thing is that the gliders are in fact a really complex structure. Everything is soft, everything moves, no point on the glider can be considered as a rigid, as a fixed point in space. No part of the glider can be approximated as a rigid body if you want to do it correctly. And it's a really complex. All the things are connected together with a small line, so sewn together. And yeah, it's really not easy, and it takes a very experienced and a smart person to know how to connect all the parts that are on your glider in a way that the glider flies. So the designers are usually not necessarily, but usually they are quite smart. They know what they're doing, at least they should. And in a way they really have a good understanding on how the parts are connected to each other and how one part of the glider affects the behavior, flying behavior, collapse behavior, and all other things. And in the development stage, which can be quite time-consuming, all other things, basically everything you see or feel on your glider is defined. Everything. So cell widths, so how wide apart are your ribs, airfoil is defined, rib height is defined, the rotation and holes of the ribs are defined, risers are defined, attachment points are defined, diagonal types and positions, mini ribs location and size, vector strap location and width. Design is also important at this stage because you obviously do not want to cut your glider too much unless you're BGD. But I mean, I don't want to be, No, the thing about cutting the sail is that you have to sew it, and that takes time. That's all I wanted to say. And besides the design, you have to define the 3D shaping, rod positions, length and shape, and etc. They're really everything you can see, feel, and or touch, whatever. If it has to be defined at some point, then that's what the designers are paid for. Obviously, you do not do that manually because there are some there is a software support for that, making a life of a designer a bit easier. Some of the softwares are commercial, some of them are private. The most known commercial software, I think, is GliderPlan. Probably any serious company uses GliderPlan, but that's not, I'm not trying to market GliderPlan, but that's how it is. And I would say that best-selling companies started to develop their own software for whatever the reason. But yeah, so there are commercial and private softwares available, and the end result of the development stage is, in fact, a 3D model of the glider, which I will show you now because I can. Yeah, so I was a bit too quick. This is just an example of what needs to be defined. This is an Excel sheet, one single Excel sheet, but there are like 12, 15. And each number here has a meaning, and a designer knows exactly what each number does. That's just to point out how complex it really is. That's another example of that sheet. And the end result is here. Looks boring, it's just a glider. But that's the end result of the development sheet. which we need before we continue to the simulation stage. And this is also one part we need for the simulation stage. This is actually even more important than the first picture I showed to you. And for those of you who are familiar with the simulation, this is a FEM mesh, which I will hide quickly. Thanks. Yeah. So after the development stage comes the simulation stage, which is for obvious reasons the most interesting. One of them is that I do it. And it just recently started to gain more and more attention. The reason why is because it can reduce production costs quite a lot, severely, and it can also improve the performance of your gliders, or safety, or whatever you are simulating. These are the two main reasons, and there are two different types of simulations. One of them is the structural analysis and fluid flow analysis. You want to do both, but at least one of them is better than nothing. But you can also, so you can do them separately. You can analyze the structure, or you can analyze the fluid flow separately. But an even smarter way is to do them combined together with the so-called name fluid-solid interaction simulation. I don't really know what other companies use. I have a good feeling that BGD is doing fluid-solid interaction, but that's just my feeling. I'm not trying to claim anything. But either way, the best companies are paying more and more attention to the simulation stage for several reasons, and that's really good. And in my opinion, all of the companies that will ignore this stage will slowly disappear into history. So I said there are two different types of analysis. One of them is structural analysis, and in the structural analysis you usually check your glider if the glider will have any wrinkles or if it will be deformed. Because if you can do that on the development stage, then you will not be surprised once the glider is in fact sewn together. So you save at least 1 month of sewing and all the money that costs for the material. And yeah, you can clearly see, at least in the front row, you can clearly see the wrinkles here and here, which is obviously not something you want. And if you see that in the simulation stage, you still have time to fix it before more time and money is spent. The same example here and here and here. There's a dent that should definitely not be here. These are the things you can see from the structural analysis. So we usually check performance, speed, internal pressure, stability, and most importantly, I would say, deformations. And for the fluid flow analysis, which is also executed, we usually optimize the airfoil, we optimize the cell openings, the position and the width of them. The plan form is also optimized, the curvature is adapted if required, and ballooning, which is, I would say, very important on the glider, if you know that or not, but ballooning is very important. This can be optimized in a way in a fluid flow simulation. Yeah, this, for example, is the, I don't know, lift distribution, I think, but I'm not sure, I don't know. Yeah, that's the simulation stage. After the simulation stage, comes the prototyping, which is in fact a correlation between the development stage, simulation stage, and test flying. That's prototyping is all these three things together. The reason why is because while the pilots are test flying your latest proto, the designer is usually already working on a new proto. So while, I don't know, your friends are doing all the maneuvers, the designer is already in the development and in the simulation stage, improving the difficulties with the glider. And at this point, I would just like to point out that test flying is not as simple and nice and dream job as it sounds, because it is in fact really hard. Yeah, you don't just go on an evening flight, but you have to do all the maneuvers.
I want to add something. If you like, because of the test flying, Nova had produced a video about the test flying on Tenerife in November. And it's very interesting because there you can see what people, I think, I don't know if you were in this team as well, are talking to the test pilots on Tenerife, and then they try a lot of things, and something they failed, and then they do it better. And I think this is a good combination, because there you see how much work is behind for creating a completely new glider. Yeah.
So when you go on an evening flight, they actually don't. They do maneuvers for a reason. And a good example is also when you feel the air is rough and you just don't like flying anymore, you can go and land, while they cannot do that. I mean, their job is to test the glider even in rough air. So, yeah, if you ever have a chance to talk with them, you will see that they fly even in conditions when they don't feel really good, but they just have to. And besides that, they also do a lot of fixing the glider on the side. So, I don't know, they see that the behavior on the collapses is not okay, and they decide to cut the diagonals, cut the cell openings, shorten the lines, whatever. They change, they do it on the side. And then they test it again, and they see that it's even worse than before, so they stick it back together with the simple stick. It's amazing, but they still go flying anyway. Yeah, and it usually takes about a month of flying days when before the new prototype arrives. And believe me that after 30 days, this glider is more or less useless. They basically destroy it. That's one of the reasons, besides safety, that why you don't see a lot of prototypes flying in the air. Yeah, after the prototyping stage, there are the boarding parts, which is the certification, because every glider needs to be certified. There are two types, which is load test before the flight test, and the glider obviously has to pass the load test before the flight test takes place. And yeah, in the meantime, you do nothing, you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. But if the simulations were done correctly, you should pass the load tests easily, I guess. While I do not know that any company would simulate flight, like flight behavior in a sense that collapse behavior. We are not there yet, but maybe if I start working. Yeah, but I mean, simulating collapses is a bit tricky. Maybe one day. After the certification, you obviously want to build some stock and prepare release news. Hopefully your glider is good. If it's good because you've done the simulation stage correctly, or you called me. And if it's good, you will get rich, or if you did not call me, you will die trying. Yeah, after that you can simply relax because your job is more or less done, or move to the next model, to the next glider. Now, what I want to do before I finish is go back to the scope, because I want to give you a bit of a time span or a feeling of how long each stage takes. Oh, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, but you get it. So the motivation is done. Yeah, that's a matter of a beer or two. But if there are too many beers, then this does not happen below. So it's a matter of a couple of minutes, I guess. The basic technical data is about the same order, so a couple of minutes. This is done quite quickly, because once you have the motivation, you have a rough feeling of what you want to achieve, and the basic technical data is easily defined. The first time-consuming part comes at the development stage, which depends. If you're trying to build the glider from zero, it can take up to a couple of days. But if you're just trying to update it, to change a small detail, I don't know, to add a diagonal or to change line lengths, it's a matter of minutes. So, but if you're doing it from zero, it's a couple of days. The simulation stage is tricky because if the simulation stage is done correctly, it takes a couple of minutes, maybe hours. But if the simulation stage is not very smart or optimized, it can take days or weeks. So that's a matter of how precise you want your simulation stage to be, and how smart or optimized the simulation stage is. And of course, how much time you want to spend on it. After the simulation stage comes the prototyping. So it takes roughly 4 to 10 days to build a wing, depending on the complexity, of course. The simplest wing can be built in 4 days, but if the design is complex, it can take up to 10 days or more, depends. And you need approximately 30 flying days to really test the proto and to see what works and what doesn't work, and what the next prototype should have, what improvements should have. After the prototyping stage is the certification. Theoretically, it can be completed in 1 day, but it usually is not, because of the bad weather, or maybe the test pilots are busy or whatever. So instead of 1 day, more realistic is 1 month to get the certification. And then building a stock new wing release, that's 1 to 2 months, assuming that material is available, which currently is not in any company, actually. So yeah, that's why you are currently waiting for your wings, if any of you order it, because there is no material on stock in most of the companies. So if you are extremely lucky, all this sums up to 36 days. So you can get your idea and do all the things I said before, and if you're successful in your first prototype, you can have a brand new wing in 36 days. But good luck with that. If you're extremely unlucky, you will never ever finish it. But realistically, it takes up to 5-6 prototypes, and each takes about 30 days. Then the certification is another 30 days, so that brings up to roughly about half a year or more. So there's a lot of work behind it. It takes a lot of time. And that's why your wings are not cheap, because there are people doing them. Me. Thank you. If there are any questions, I am here to answer them. Yes.
What do you think about Xenon?
What do I think about Xenon?
Yeah.
Xenon is nice. I don't know, I did not fly it yet, so I don't know. It looks nice, that's all I know.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Xenon?
I don't know, I haven't tried it yet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This time plan for one size or for all sizes?
Oh, one size. But they don't do them sequentially. They usually do them in parallel. Semi-parallel. No, I mean, once they're happy with one size, they immediately usually start doing the other sizes too.
Depends on simulation.
Yeah.
I'm glad you can use
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, regarding the software, you mentioned that there are some private software. Do you use any private or just this?
I'm from Nova, and we developed our own. Yeah.
Okay.
For everything, basically. For simulation part and the development stage, we have our own. Yeah.
What is the difference between people and you?
The difference is that Pipo is an actual designer of wings, and I only develop the software that he uses to design wings.
So he tells you make this.
Yeah, he basically tells me, okay, I want to have this feature, I don't know, I want to implement whatever. I have to find a stupid idea. Okay, I want to build a glider with without lines, yeah. And then he will say me, okay, prepare your software so that we can build the glider without lines.
Winglets. Tell us about the winglets.
Yeah, for that, yeah. Yeah, for example, yeah. Yeah, if we wanted to build the wing with winglets, then people would write to me, let's make that happen, and then I have to do magic. Yeah. So he's the actual guy that builds. He's the designer, and I'm also the only the software guy.
Okay, about the BGD, they cut code a lot, as you said. Does it influence performance? Because the airflow, I think, is disturbed because of it. No?
It's tricky to answer that. You mean because of the design?
Because the graphical design and
Yeah, it's tricky to answer that because the part that is sewn together does not stretch the same as the part that is not sewn together, if you know what I'm talking about. So, generally speaking, at every stitch you can expect wrinkles. If you can account for that if you're smart. I don't know. They probably do something because I do not see many wrinkles on their gliders, but generally speaking, no.
can you measure it, or it's just
Ooh, no. What would you measure? Airflow?
I don't know, airflow probably.
Nah, okay, so one thing is that you cannot measure airflow because by measuring airflow you disturb the airflow. So you're measuring, sorry, I don't find a better word, but you're measuring bullshit. No, but I mean, imagine if you put whatever you put inside the airflow, you're measuring. I don't know what you're
Yeah,
measuring.
but you can compare the same design with cuts. and
No, that's not measured. No. No. I mean, the reason why Nova does not publish glide ratios anymore, it used to, is because they are so hard to measure. It's really difficult to measure them precisely.
What about your simulations?
Yeah, oh, no, okay. We ignore sewing there. In the simulations, everything is a single part. The whole top sail, the whole bottom sail is a single part. There are no sewings there. You do not want that actually inside the simulation, because I have an answer. Because of this. The simulation stage can take a couple of minutes if you ignore the sewing, or it can take months if you add the sewing inside.
Not worth it?
No. Because it's just time, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Are you in academia?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you write the software in a way that it runs on multiple computers in order to fasten this thing?
Yeah.
So would it be an argument for counting in the sewing, then running it on more computers?
No, there's not enough benefit.
Okay.
there are bigger issues in the flow simulation than the swimming part.
Which one?
I know that the majority of companies simulate the glider as a rigid body, which in fact is not, because it deforms as soon as the air pressure is different. And that's, I think, the biggest issue. And another one is that the majority of companies ignore the internal structure completely because of the first thing I said, that it's a rigid body. So when the glider is rigid, you do not need any internal structure for the simulation of airflow or pressure. Because the pressure is a matter of the airfoil shape, not the internal structure. So there is a lot of possibilities for improvement. Yeah, does that answer your question? Thank you. Any more?
Yeah, what features Nova has exclusive on the software?
You don't really think that I will answer that.
Just try.
No, sorry. I cannot. I mean, yeah, there's one obvious one. I can tell you this one, yeah. We control everything. So if we or people comes up with an idea and does not want everyone else to know, we can do it secretly. So by secretly, I mean that he simply writes to me and says, do that, I do that, and he tries it, and if it works, it works. While if you are using a commercial software, you have to ask whatever the company is, and then it's obviously available to everyone.
What about the sport class 2 license?
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, what about the certification and yeah, I know it's not possible to do yet, but I'm hearing the rumors it will be soon.
Yeah, soon. Soon. That's all I can say. I mean, it's not a secret. I don't know when, but soon. I don't know. I don't do that. So my part is the simulation stage, not the certification. I don't know. But anyway, you should upgrade to E&D glider, and problem is solved. Any more questions?
Yeah, do you collect the data from the test pilot in some automated way?
Yeah, that would be cool, yeah. But no. It's a great idea, but we don't do that. One reason is because quite often the test pilots have a subjective opinion, which is hard to make it objective. But that would be cool, yeah. That would be really cool, yeah. But no, we don't. I don't know if maybe other companies do. We don't.
Yeah, that's the second question. Do you know any other company which is more advanced in technology than Nova currently?
Yeah. A company. No, I mean I would like to answer it, but I don't know, because obviously even if you make a presentation like this, you do not want to share everything. So even if I was ever or would ever be on a presentation that Ozone would make, they would not share everything. So in fact, I have a good feeling what they're doing, but I don't really know what they're doing. BGD is quite open about it. They post videos. So if you're a guy like me that has a fetish for this, then you can get a rough feeling of what they're doing, but you don't really exactly know until somebody tells you. So I don't know. For example, Hannes Papež started, 10 years ago, more probably, with his own software. Maybe he's the guy. I don't know. No idea. Yeah? There you go.
How do you evaluate your simulations?
That's a good question.
They're good?
Yeah.
Is it the developer that has a feeling about it?
Usually that helps. Yeah, usually the knowledge of the developer helps a lot, and also the experience. So the more you use the software and then test it and then make videos and photos and analyze it, the better feeling you get how good the simulations are. But your question is, how do we evaluate them? And my answer is we don't at the moment. At least not intentionally. So, yeah. There is no proper verification.
Because you cannot measure a lot.
Well, there are a couple of things you could measure, but the majority, you actually, it would be really difficult, yeah, to measure them. Yeah. Any more? Thank you. Bye.